Hi, a very good evening to all. My name is Gaurab Mandal and I'm a student of the PGP 2017-19 batch at IIM Trichy. For our Indian Economy and Policy course, we were asked to discuss an important economic problem that India faces. I'm going to discuss about the topic, the fiscal deficit of India breaching the FY18 target and why its rise is bad for India's economy. First things first, what is fiscal deficit? The fiscal deficit is equal to the budgetary deficit plus market borrowing plus other liabilities. Fiscal deficit is basically a measure of how much money the government needs in addition to what it already has to cover the expenses of the year. India's fiscal deficit is among the highest in the G20 countries. The large increase in public debt involving large interest payments year after year will badly affect economic growth through reducing investing resources for spending on infrastructure and social sectors like education, health, housing, etc. The government's plan to raise additional market borrowings of Rs 50,000 crore through dated government securities has left too much room for a fiscal slippage. The move, which is being seen as a way to meet the revenue shortfall on account of lower tax collection under the GST, may put a spanner in the government's fiscal consolidation path. This comes after the GST collection numbers for November 2017 witnessed a continuous decline for the second straight month. Experts have predicted that the fiscal deficit is likely to shoot up by 30 basis points in the current fiscal. The country's benchmark 10-year bond declined to a nearly 17-month low, pushing its yield up by as much as 17 basis points, a day after the government announced additional borrowing for the year ending in March, surpassing the market expectation. Moreover, India's fiscal deficit till the end of November has already breached the target and touched 112% of the budget estimate for 2017-18 due to higher expenditure. According to the data released by the CGA, the fiscal deficit in absolute terms was Rs 6.12 lakh crores during April to November 2017-18. In a research note, Bank of America Merrill Lynch said the additional borrowing of Rs 50,000 crore by the center is a negative surprise that will sustain higher yields and delay lending rate cuts, which is a key for economic growth recovery. So how does a fiscal deficit harm the economy? It harms the economy in the following ways. A higher government expenditure will push up demand and generate more money in the economy. This may lead to higher inflation. Also, a higher fiscal deficit means government is not able to earn as much as it is spending. So often it raises taxes in some form or the other. The government, in order to repay its debt, is likely to levy more taxes in the future. It could be either higher inflation or higher rates, or worse, it could be both. Interest rates in an emerging country like India, where there is a high fiscal deficit, leaves little room for the interest rate cuts. A higher interest rate may affect private investments from taking off in a growing economy like India. Also in the private sector, more the average borrowing the government from leaves much less pool for the private sector to borrow, stalling its growth plans. So what are some of the reforms that can be undertaken to help with the problem of fiscal deficit? Reforms in tax structures. This doesn't necessarily mean to increase the tax rate, but also to collect the tax effectively. There are many loopholes in a system which makes it easier for a lot of population to evade taxation, thereby increasing black money in the market and depriving the government of the funds to run a country. One implementation could be the scheme of voluntary disclosure of income. Also, the improved profit by the public sector enterprises will help to reduce the fiscal deficit, since the public sector money is basically government money. The government doesn't give subsidies to the students on petrol and gas directly, but rather directs the PSUs to bear the cost. Also, the austerity measures like limiting government perks and the privilege of the ministers can be taken up. So we'll discuss a little about the history, like what the government has previously done to reduce the fiscal deficit. In 2014, India had announced a slew of austerity measures as mentioned earlier, including a 10% cut in certain types of government spending and curbs on foreign travel and conferences to meet its deficit reduction goal amid slower than estimated revenue growth and spiraling expenses. Also, Prime Minister Modi at that time aimed to cut non-planned expenditure, which includes the so-called non-productive expenses such as interest payment or debts and subsidies, by 10% across all departments. Also, in addition, the ministries had been asked to not spend more than one-third of the money allocated in the budget in the last quarter of the fiscal year, with expenditure in March restricted to 15% of the budgeted amount. The government had also banked on its disinvestments or asset sale program to take off to meet the shortfall in revenue collections. So this is a short thing about fiscal deficit. Thank you for listening to me.